Apology demons, leave us alone. All right, we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. This is the big month of author interviews, and I am super honored to have a New York Times #1 best-selling author of some of my favorite series on. It's so good to have you. Thank you for joining. Now that we're live, I'm like starstruck.
Yeah, like we were just chatting backstage. It's no big thing. Thank you so much for having me on. Thanks
It's
for
my
reaching out.
pleasure. So, for those who are joining and don't know who our special guest is today, you've written several #1 New York Times bestselling novels, including the Three Dark Crowns series, and then you've got your Buffy Next Generation series, and you have a new book coming out. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your books?
Sure. So, hi, I'm Kendare Blake. I'm the author of all those books that Katherine just mentioned. My newest one is called Champion of Fate. It's actually in the same universe as the Three Dark Crown series, but you don't have to read one to read the other. Like they both stand on their own. But if you have read the Three Dark Crown series and you liked it, you'll notice a bunch of like Easter eggs, and there's a character that crosses over. So, but it's not necessary to read it. Champion of Fate is about an order of immortal warriors, immortal warrior women, whose task it is, they serve the goddess of glory. So their task is to find mortal people with, like the possibilities of greatness. Like they have potential inside them, and their job is to guide them and turn them into heroes so that they earn glory and feed their goddess. Champion of Fate is the story of a young woman who was rescued by this order when she was orphaned as a child, and she's been raised by them. So they're like her found family. And now she is ready to become a full member of the Immortal Order, which is a big deal because, you become immortal. And you also get an immortal horse, which she's had a horse since she was a little girl. And he's grown up with her, and now they're like both ready. We're like, gonna do this, gonna become immortal. It's gonna be awesome. But of course, nothing's ever that easy. If it was, I wouldn't have made it a book. So it's a lot of fun. I had so much fun writing it, and definitely fun writing the Fenburn crossovers from Three Dark Crowns. So yeah, that's my newest. Buffy, the last Buffy book comes out this spring, April 9th, I think.
Yay! I'm getting so
And
excited.
yeah, and I'm coming to you today from the pretty cloudy Pacific Northwest. Yeah.
Yeah, and I hope everything was well there after all the storms over the weekend. It was quite rocky. I know around, I'm sort of in the Tennessee area,
Mm,
Tennessee, Mississippi area. So it's just sort of one of those great cold starts to the week.
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
A good
last
week
week
to
we just
sand
had
and write.
rain. Rain, rain, rain. Thought we were just going to drown. But no, it's fine. We're used to the rain, so like our soil is like a pro at drainage. So we usually
Oh,
don't have that many problems.
well, that's good at least. Yeah. So, with so much going on in your writing world, it sort of begs the question, how did you get started writing, like, professionally?
Professionally, that's that's anybody's guess. Um, I got started writing just because I loved reading, and any kind of assignment in school that required me to write words was my favorite. I liked papers, I liked opinion papers, I liked research papers, any kind of, even my research papers, I'd find a way to like sneak in a couple of snarky lines about whatever, no matter how dry the subject, I'd find a way to insert something that would amuse myself into it because I just enjoyed the writing so much.
Mhm.
And I'd been writing short stories for a long time and submitting them and getting rejected, as is the tradition.
Mhm.
And then I started writing novels and getting those rejected, so I'm like leveling up in my rejections. And I'd pretty much given it up. I went to college for something else, and I had a different job. Um, And then I was just so miserable.
Mm.
And so I told my parents, I'm like, look, I'm going to move back in with you guys. And they're like, cool. And I didn't have like any other siblings that were also home. So they allowed me to come back. They're like, your room's still the same. It's good. And then I went and did a master's degree in London, mostly an excuse just to live in London for a year. But I also did study, writing, just writing for an entire year. And that really did change the way I thought about writing. It changed the way that I wrote. Do I think it's necessary to be published? Actually, no, because the first things of mine that were published, I wrote before I started the course. So, but I had a great time and I learned so much. And it was like a literary program. So I was writing a lot of literary stories. And then one of those sold, I actually won a prize, and that was cool. But then the other stories that ended up selling off the course were like stories where I'd put in a little weirdness, a little horror, a little fantasy, because that's really where my roots were. So then when I got off the course and I came back and I started writing other novels, that's what they were. They were tinged with horror, they were tinged with fantasy. And so that's what started selling. Anna Dressed in Blood was my first novel. When I started querying with her, I expected much the same. I'm so used to rejection at this point. I've had hundreds and thousands of delightful rejections. But actually, as soon as I started querying with Anna, I started to get interest right away from agents, and I ended up getting offers from 2. So yeah, it's like you just hit the right project at the right time.
Yeah.
So you just gotta keep plugging away.
So after you finished writing school, do you feel like anything you learned there helped you go into the querying process stronger?
No, because I'd already been an old pro at being rejected. Like, I already knew how all that worked. Actually, I kind of became like the sage in my master's course. People would ask me like, "Oh, how is it being," and I'd have all the, like, no, I'd look at their query letters and, I'd give them tips and pointers. And because some of these people were writers just from like an academic sense, and they were just now thinking about breaking into it from a publication standpoint. So they had no idea what to do. So no, I already had the ability. The rejection ability was already in my repertoire by then.
So much rejoicing when you got the first sale, I'm guessing.
Yeah, that was so weird. I almost couldn't believe it.
Oh.
I could not believe it. After years and years and years of not being able to sell a dang thing, all of a sudden it just turned. Something about my writing turned, or something about the stories that I was deciding to tell. It just hit the right time. And I started selling just about everything that I sent out, which odd. That's just short stories, though. I still got rejected by a few more novels before I wrote Anna.
Yeah. And since then, you've been published by Tor. You've had works published by other big name publishers. What is it like going from the person striving to actually seeing, your name up there on these big bestsellers?
It's weird. It's always weird. I've had books published by Tortine. My first 5 novels were published with Tortine, and now I have a new book out with Tortine. Not really new, but they just released the Anna Dressed in Blood Anniversary Edition, so it's in stores again. And I'm like, that is so bizarre that my first novel is back in stores again with a brand new spanking cover and a whole new novella set 10 years later that they let me write. And that's been extremely cool. Like, it is so wild that people will send me pictures like, here's Anna on the shelves again after 12 years. Like, that is crazy. But that never gets old. It never gets old. Every time a book comes out, I'm so excited to go and see it on a shelf for the first time. And I've put books out, every year. And so my space on the shelf kind of keeps growing. I take up like a nice little section in Barnes and Noble now, which is such an honor and a privilege. And it makes me sad because all of my little book babies are there together, except for all these bodies, which is like not fantasy fiction, so they move her all the way over to the regular fiction section. So she's all by herself. So sometimes I'll like let the booksellers know, I'm like, this might sell better if you put her with me, like with the rest of me, because then people who were there to buy books from me might go, oh, what's this? Instead of, she's just, I just feel bad. She's all alone.
Oh no.
Sometimes I'll sneak her over with her siblings so she feels safe.
Yeah, yeah. So with so many options, and especially with all the rejections and all the waiting these days, there's indie publishing, there's hybrid publishing, there's traditional. What sort of pushed you to keep going, especially when you had so many rejections coming in to go the traditional route?
Remember back when I was being rejected, self-publishing had not taken off yet.
Mm-hmm.
No. It would have been a totally uphill battle. That it just didn't exist. And even now, if you're in the wrong category, self-publishing can be very hard. If you're writing romantasy or romance, like, hey, that's the place to be. That is a fantastic option. The readers know where to find you. You've got just the market is waiting, and you should get there. Have all the control. You can write at your own pace. I mean, you control the releases. You control everything. But I would have had no idea how to get my books onto bookshelves, and that's where I really wanted to see them. I wouldn't have known how to reach out to librarians. I was, like you said, a lot of writers are introverts, and I was like, yeah, I'm a Midwestern introvert, so we just don't want to bother anybody ever. That's, being a bother is our worst nightmare. It's a very much like, oh, sorry, like, oh, no, don't worry about it. That's like the things that most frequently come out of my mouth. So I would have been terrible at asking people if they would like to stock my book. It just would not have happened. So I knew I was not a good fit for that. And luckily, the traditional publishing has worked out pretty well. Now, of course, I think about it because, there are kind of some ideas floating around in my brain that maybe are a little bit romantasy, or maybe they are a little bit just romance. And I'm like, hey, that could be fun. Like maybe I should try that. Just, like, because it seems to be very creatively fulfilling in lots of different ways. But for now and then I realize I'm also lazy, so I don't do that.
Yeah, I tell people all the time there's pros and cons to both. And we've had authors on this channel who have always been indie, who were traditional and went indie, who are indie going traditional. And it's really about what's best for your books and what's best for your writing journey, I think, along the way. But one of the biggest questions that I get a lot from indie authors is, are you giving up your creative control when you go traditional? Do they come in and they're like, oh, you've got to change who this person ends up with or who's still alive at the end?
No, an editor will never give you like walking papers. It's never make or break. Their goal is to make the book as successful as possible. You both have the same goal, and you both have the same love for the book. If you both have slightly different visions for it, sometimes it can get a little contentious. I remember my editor she asked me a question in an email about Three Dark Crowns, and it was so fundamental to the plot of the book, like the concept of the book, that I freaked out, and I wrote she's like, well, we can talk about it on our call on Monday. And I wrote up like this 3-page manifesto of why we could not change this. And I had it ready, to read out to her when we talked on the phone on Monday. And I read like the first 2 sentences, and she was like, oh, okay, I get it now. And that was it. I spent like a whole weekend freaking out, and she was just like, oh, okay, I got it. Now I see what you're doing. So it's always been that way. For one thing, it's rare that I'll have a big conflict that's like, whoa, and then sometimes she'll just say things like, don't you think more people should die at the end? And I'll be like, yes, like maybe more people should. She doesn't like say like, maybe this person should, maybe this person should. She's just like, I feel like there should be more bloodshed here. And I'm like, I can do that. That is a good idea. And it's just like, she'll put like, she'll try to figure out what it was I was attempting to do and then bring it up, bring it up a level. So it's never, she'll tell me if something's not working, and then we'll figure out how to fix it, because I trust her to tell me if something's not working. And I usually know too, like I can feel it too. I'm like, yeah, this whole like subthread is not where it needs to be right now. So, and then it's just nice to have her there to tackle it. And when I say her, I can say that across all of my editors, because they're all women. So that's nice. And they all kind of function the same way. I have one editor who, my Buffy books, I always mess up the first third. Like I'm just fumbling around in Sunnydale, just having a blast, but just farting around. And then like, I'll nail the ending. So every time I get an edit letter from her, she's like, let's rework the first third. And then you nail the ending. So we just have to really revise, the beginning to get to where I was going, because she could see where I'm going. She just needs to help me get there. The only place you do give up creative control is your cover. I will say that your cover art, sometimes if you're a big enough author, or if the cover they give you is bad enough, you'll be able to get it changed. But in general, if it's just a difference of opinion, like, I don't really like that, too bad. You're going to take it. And after it comes out, you're going to tell you people that you love it. Like, that is now your job. Even if you're like, your eye twitches every time you see it on a screen, you have to be like, oh my God, isn't it so pretty? Oh my God, look at the colors. But luckily, I've had very few covers that are that way. My Anti-Goddess series had a cover change in the middle. After the hardcover came out of Anti-Goddess, they changed the covers, like the entire cover scheme for the paperback and every book going forward. But that wasn't my publisher. That was a request on Barnes & Noble. And Barnes & Noble, so sometimes if Barnes & Noble, they're a big enough buyer where if they say, you know what, if you change this cover to what we want, we'll double our order. You're going to change it. You just have to do that to get the double order. But man, I did not like the new covers. I did not like them at all. So then every other cover that came out, I'd have to be like, oh man, look at the colors they chose. Aren't they gorgeous? Like, yes, the colors are good and everything else is very bad. That was not at all a Tor decision.
Yeah.
I loved the covers that they designed at first. But yes, so you do give up some control. Also, you don't get to decide when your book comes out. So if you're like a spring person, hey, you might be on tour in December. You just don't know.
Whenever they feel the book. Yes. Oh, goodness. Well, thank you for sharing that. I know that's something that we've heard a lot and might be really helpful for authors who are on the fence. Like, I want to go that route, but I don't want to give up the creativity too.
No, your books are always yours and you can always walk, and they're never going to make you. I've never heard of anybody who's locked horns with their editors so hard that they're like, F it, blowing up the car and I'm starting over. No, you'll find ways forward together.
That's great. So you have so many different books you were sharing. You've got a few different series. You've done shorter stories. You've done full-length novels. And some of them are coming out at the same time. And from our perspective as readers, we imagine that you're writing multiple books at a time, or writing one book and then jumping to another book and then jumping to another book. How do you keep all these very different characters straight in your head while you're writing all of these?
Well, I actually can't really work on the same, like two different things in the same day. I can't. And sometimes I'll try to go back and forth, every other day. And usually I can't do that either. So I'll just devote time to one project until it's finished. And I'll just have to try to wedge them all in. So luckily, short stories usually only take me a maximum of 3 days. I've never spent longer than 3 days on a short story. And so far, it's worked out with my novels that I'll be able to draft one and then, let it sit while it's with the editor, and then I'll draft something else or revise something else. So I can keep my brain pretty compartmentalized. And I mean, when you're working on a book, the characters are so strong with you and the world is so strong with you. You don't actually need, it's a pretty quick mental shift that like, oh, now I'm back in Sunnydale. Got it. I know exactly, what the vibe of Sunnydale is, or, oh, I'm back on Fenburn. Yeah. Sometimes if I've been away, I went back to Anna Dressed in Blood last year after 12 years away from it, 12 years away from the character. And this is a first person, so it's his voice. And it's 10 years later. So he was 17. Now he's 27. So I was afraid of that. And when she asked me if I could do it, I'm like, I don't know. I will try to come up with something. And over the years, because people have asked for a third Anna book before, and I've just never had one because I'm like, I ask him what he's up to and I get no response. I think he might be dead. It's a very dangerous job. But this time I asked and he just started like chatting up a firestorm in my ear. He's like, oh, hey, how you been? Oh, I'm fine. I do DoorDash sometimes. I'm still ghost hunting. I run a podcast with my friends, and he just told me everything that was going on in his life now. And I was like, okay, so you're alive. That's good. And obviously you're still there and willing to chat. So let's do this. And I just dove in and it was a delight. Like the voice was still there. He was still himself. I mean, I could tell that he was older, but it was still him. It was still like, it felt very much like seeing somebody you haven't seen since high school. And yes, they've changed, but like, they're still themselves, like fundamentally. He still had the same quirks. He still had the same like verbal tics. I'm like, yes. And I didn't even have to go back and reread the books, the first book or both books. I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to do any of it. I was so impressed with him. Like, thank you for being such a strong narrator that I had to do less work because, lazy. And that was, so your characters, they just kind of are there in your subconscious if you're not a crazy person, or if you are a crazy person like me. I always just think that, some parallel universe, some alternate reality, they're just living their lives and maybe someday they'll pop back in with another story and maybe not.
I love that so much. Yeah. Because I think so many times we fall in love with a book from an author, especially with a world as developed as the ones you come up with. And we're like, we want to read more, but maybe those characters don't have more that are ready for us. So 10 years later, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. I have like finagled a way back to Fenburn. So, some characters are just, when you live on an island with that much magic on it, chances are there's going to be a good story brewing pretty much all the time. There is no shortage of Fenburn stories to tell. It's just, do people want to hear them?
Right.
I got to write the novellas, The Young Queens, which was originally that was like where the novel started, where Three Dark Crowns started, was when they were little girls at the Black Cottage. And then my agent was actually like, we should probably just do a very little amount of this and then quickly get them to when they're 16. Like that, we're writing for a young adult audience. Let's just move the kids' stuff along. And so I cut it. But because the series was popular, I was able to go back and fully tell that story, which was a huge privilege. And I was also able to tell the true story of the Oracle Queen, which is one of those background tales. You do a lot of research for your books, and some of it is just stuff that and never makes it on the page.
Right.
So the true story of the Oracle Queen was always something that I thought I would just know. And, thanks to readers, everybody gets to know the truth.
Yay.
Yeah. So sometimes that works out.
Yes. So out of all the books and series that you've been working on, is there one that's been more fun to write than the others?
Pure fun is Buffy. Buffy was my favorite show when I was a teenager, and now they let me run rampant through Sunnydale. So yes, that is pure fun, and it's also kind of unreal. Like I can't quite wrap my mind around it that I get to write for these characters that I idolized when I was, 14, 15, however old I was when I was watching that show. It's amazing. And yeah, I'm going to be really bummed when the series comes to an end because I love to talk Buffy with people. Like, I love to meet readers because I get so excited when somebody pops up with one of the Buffy books. I'm like, oh my God, you're a Buffy person. Let's talk each other ears off about our favorite episodes for like 10 minutes right now.
Yes.
And it's just so much fun.
Yes.
But it was also really scary because Buffy has been around for so long, and I knew going in that whatever I wrote, I wasn't going to please everybody. Like I was going to disappoint some fans. It was inevitable, and that was really hard to come to terms with because the last thing you want as a fan is to disappoint a fellow fan. Like that's such a bummer. But I really just had to I just got to write what I'm going to write, and the chips will fall, and some people are really going to enjoy it, and then some people are just going to be like, God, this is so stupid. And I just had to, understand that was inevitable. But yes, Buffy has been the most fun. Those books are about 100,000 words, and I write them in 3 months.
Wow.
Like that's way faster than I write anything else because they are absolute pure fun. And they're the only books where the revision letter comes and I'm like, sweet, because I just get to write more Buffy stuff. I don't care if I have to erase the entire first third and redo it because that just means I get to spend more time in New Sunnydale and tell way more Buffy jokes. So,
yay.
But that doesn't mean that the Buffy books have been my favorite to write because as much fun as they are, they're not mine. Buffy does not belong to me. It's an honor to be able to work with her, and I'm so excited because I actually got to write her in the third book. It's what I've been waiting for.
Yes.
But writing my own books, it's different. There's definitely a tighter connection. Like my books and I are bonded. Buffy and I are friends. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's like recording one of your best friends versus recording about your child.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I'm one of those people that came across the Buffy books, and I was so nervous when I first saw the first one out because fellow fan, and I was like, I couldn't imagine the pressure being an author of taking one of my fan fictions and having to elevate it for public reading and critique and reception. And when I read the first book, I fell in love with how you portrayed everything about the series, and it blew me away. So thank you for all your hard work on it.
Oh,
Because it
thank
means a
you.
lot.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy you enjoyed it. I felt like I think the first book in every generation has the weakest beginning because you can feel it that I'm kind of tiptoeing. I'm tiptoeing out of caution and because like out of respect. But I can feel it when I reread the opening of In Every Generation. I'm like, I'm just not in the Buffyverse yet. But then by the time we get to One Girl in All the World, like I'm just balls to the wall. It's all out there at that point. Just when you think you can't wedge in another Buffy Easter egg, you can. You can always. There's always room. At one point, my editor said, "Do you think this is too many Andrew jokes?" And I'm like, "There's no such thing.
No.
You can't have too many Andrew jokes. I'm going to put in another one just because you said that."
Somebody needs to make a joke about Andrew jokes.
Yes. I actually, no, I'm not going to say anything because that would spoil things for the
no
third
spoilers.
book.
But no, so it's a good segue here for people who are new, who are just now watching, and they're like, wait, there's new Buffy books. There's a new author I don't know. Which of your series do you typically recommend for someone to start out with who's wanting to get a feel for your voice and your writing?
That's hard to say because I do write a lot of different stuff. The Buffy books are not my voice. That's Buffyverse. That's Buffy speak. I wasn't trying to do a Buffy book by me. Nobody wants that. We just want more Buffy. So that's what I was trying to do. I generally ask them what they like, because my character voice when I'm writing horror is different than my voice when I'm writing fantasy. Three Dark Crowns is extremely different from Anna Dressed in Blood. Three Dark Crowns is like dark high fantasy-ish. So
Right.
the language that I use in that book and just the authorial voice is very different from the one that I use even in my other like urban fantasies. Like Anti-Goddess is third person past and Three Dark Crowns is third present. But I mean, they're both third person fantasies. You'd think there'd be some voice overlap, but there really isn't that much. Champion of Fate and Three Dark Crowns are both recommendable to people who like fantasies. Champion of Fate is a little more lighthearted. Three Dark Crowns is a little darker, a little more dramatic. So All These Bodies, that's true crime set in the 1950s in Minnesota. So I mostly just ask people, like, what are you in the mood for? Because I probably have something that you might like, but just because you like one of my books doesn't mean you're gonna really love all of them, because they are all just weird little babies.
Yeah. So you got something for everybody. And people who did in, there you go. You can sort of go and go, okay, I want the darker or the lighter or the witty Andrew jokes.
Do you like fantasy? Do you like horror comedies? Do you like true crime? I've got a little something. Yeah, you could even call All These Bodies a mystery almost. I really wouldn't, but there's a mystery at it. I don't have any sci-fi. For the sci-fi readers, I got nothing for you, I'm afraid. So, yeah.
So, yeah, a lot of good stuff going on, and very excited for the new books coming out this year.
Thank you.
Yes. Before we hop off, I wanted to go back to something you said earlier about your journey and how when you were in school, people looked at you as like the guru about giving advice and everything. So if you were to give a writer who's wanting to try to go this route for real on their own writing journey, some advice, what would that be?
Well, I like to give practical advice about querying, because querying is, it's the first stage if you want to get a literary agent and then go traditional publishing. You have to get that agent, and querying is so hard. It's a completely separate skill set from writing a novel. Distilling your 100,000 word novel that you've just spent a year toiling away on, and then like an additional several months polishing up to perfection, and then trying to take that huge tome and turn it into a paragraph that's about that thick, that is a skill. That is a skill that you have to develop. I don't expect that most of us are good at that right away. The number one mistake I see from people who ask me to take a look at their query letters is like, it's too long. That's too long, baby. This is way, you're really going on. It's an elevator pitch. You have a very short amount of time to grab this person's attention. This person gets, like 1,000 queries a week. You got to make it snappy. So you have one-line introduction, one line of meaty, hooky stuff. And it has to be just the bare bones. Protagonist, conflict, world, get out of there. Thank them and move on. So, and the thing is, if you get rejected off your query letter, it doesn't mean your book's bad. They haven't read your book yet. The book has nothing to do with it. It's just you've written a bad query letter. So you have to learn how to write a really good query letter first. Like, in addition to all the other stuff you've already had to learn to write the dang book, now you have to learn to write a good query letter. So do not, even though you're really excited and you want to get to that next step because your book is ready for it, don't overlook the journey of the query letter. You've got to get just as much workshopping on that thing. You've got to get people to eyeball it. You've got to compare it to your favorite flat copy of similar novels. Like, go to the bookstore or hopefully your own bookshelf. Flip open, the cover and just read that description and go like, okay, this is how you hook somebody in if you want them to pick something up off the shelf. That is what my query letter should do. It has to hook somebody in to pick the rest of my book up. And don't send your first query untested out to your dream agents. Don't do that. That's like setting yourself up for a waste. Like, send it out to a few people, and if you get flat rejections, rework your query. But if you get like that sounds really good, I'd like to see material, then you can send it out to your dream list, because then like, okay, I got the query down. Let's see if this baby can fly. But so that's like the number one piece of advice that I give. If you're ready to dive into the traditional publishing side, is to just focus on that query letter. I know it sucks. It's a very frustrating part of the process, and it's also very nerve-wracking. Once you send out those queries, you're just going to be a basket case. So just prepare for basket casehood. That's my other tip. But you will look back on it fondly. It'll be hard to imagine that, but I mean, you really will. You'll look back at how crazy you were during those days of waiting, and how often you refreshed your inbox or checked your email. But yeah, so
thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you for all that you've done to bring us the books that you've brought us. I feel like a couple of them are dearer friends to me in the last couple of years.
Thank you.
I appreciate you sharing them and really joining us and being on just to chat. This has been great.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy that you've enjoyed the books, and that we had some nice time for like some morning coffee and a chat. It's always fun.
Yes, it is. And we wish you all the best of luck with the launches coming up.
Thank you.
I've dropped all of your book links in the description box. So if you're watching and you want to check out these books, go to the description box, grab them, follow on social media and all of that to support the writing community and these amazing books. Thank you all so much for tuning in. At the end of this month, there is going to be the Indie Author Book Blitz, which has over 100 different indie fantasy and sci-fi and mystery authors coming on. So over the course of 4 days live. So if you're watching and you want to see more authors and you're interested in the indie side, you can subscribe to watch those too. But thank you so much again for joining. Have a great day.
Thank you.